Let me introduce today's presenter, Tushar Vakil. Tushar is an executive and team coach, a master facilitator, and a lifelong learner. He is passionate about leadership development as he believes that it is the best lever available to make a positive impact on organizations and society at large. He has lived and worked in the US, Middle East, and India. He has headed the learning and development functions at large organizations with employee counts of over 6,000. Over the years, he's also coached over 300 leaders and trained over 100,000 participants. So let's get to today's session. Tushar, are you ready?
Thank you, Aniket, and thank you everyone for joining. I know on the west coast of US, it's kind of early, and in Eastern Asia, it's a little bit late. So I'm so glad you could all join us today. So Google's quest. Google spent 2 years, millions of dollars, and used all of their resources to find answer to this simple question: what makes teams effective? So Google wanted to find out what makes teams effective. Now Google is Google. No, they have all kinds of resources at hand. So they conducted over 200 interviews, studied 180 real work teams, and considered over 250 variables. So variables like team composition and team dynamics. And they also used Google's immense intellect and computing power to run statistical and other analytics model. Why? To hone down on the factors that impact team effectiveness. So that's what Google was trying to find out. Now, before I discuss the results from Google, I want you guys to share your opinion on what factors matter to team effectiveness and team performance. So in just a little bit, I'm going to take a poll on what factors impact team effectiveness. But first, let me explain those factors. So the first factor is the co-location of teammates. Now, this one's very important in the post-pandemic world, correct? So are the teammates located in the physical location, same office, or different offices, or working from home? Would that impact the effectiveness or performance of the team? So that's what you are supposed to tell me. Not yet. In a minute, when I get the polls going. Next one is consensus-driven decision making. So would it make a difference if the team had an agreement that they would make decisions based on consensus? Then is, of course, introversion or extroversion of teammates. Would it make a difference if team members in the team, they were introverts or extroverts? So what is your opinion? Would that impact the effectiveness or the performance of the team? Next is individual performance of the team members. And what do I mean by that? So people who are on the team members, are they average performers? Are they high performers? Would that make a difference to the team performance or effectiveness? Yes or no? Next is seniority of the team members. So how many years of experience each and individual team member has? That's the next one. Then it comes diverse and or complementary skills. So would it matter if people or the team members had different set of skills and different sets of abilities, and they had diversity, they were different? Would it matter or not matter? Next one is team size. So what do you think? Do you think that smaller team sizes are better or larger team sizes are better? And would it impact the performance and effectiveness of the teams? Yes or no? And finally, the last one. So tenure. So what do I mean by tenure? How long has this exact same team been working together? So if the team has a long history of working together, would that impact performance or no? So you don't have to remember these 8 points. We are going to show you them on the polls, but what you are supposed to do is answer yes or no, whether any of these factors would impact the performance and effectiveness of any team. So let me go ahead and launch the poll. Okay, so a majority of people have already voted. So I'm going to end the polling and let me share the results with you. So here are the results. And the first question, the co-location of teammates, we are kind of split 50-50. Half of you think that it does matter and half of you think don't. On the second question, consensus-driven decision-making, majority, 87% think that it does matter. On the extraversion of the team members, 60% think that it doesn't matter, 40% think it matters. And on individual performance, it means if there are high performers on the team, a majority, 73% say that it does matter. Seniority of the team members, 60% say that it doesn't matter. And diverse and or complementary skills, we have a complete consensus, 100% agreement that it does matter. Team size also, it says 73% yes, 27% no. And tenure also, if the team has been working together for a long time, they know one another and it'll make. So great. So thank you guys for being active and sharing your thoughts. Now, I'm going to close the display. So now I have kind of good news or bad news for you. And the news is that none of the above factors, the 8 factors, mattered a whole lot. And what do I mean by that? In the Google's results of their project to find factors that matter to team effectiveness, they weren't even in the top 5 factors. So these factors were not even in the top 5. And Google ran several statistical models to ensure both the validity and the reliability of the data. So this is no accident. This is no coincidence. This is no correlation. This is causation. So as we said, co-location, it does make a difference if when the team is in the initial stages, if the members are located together, it does make it a little bit easier. I'll go to the couple of slides back so you can see it. So the co-location of the team members doesn't matter. Consensus-driven decision making doesn't matter. Extraversion doesn't matter. Individual performance of the team. And I know a lot of these things are counterintuitive. We think that if we put a few high performers on the team, then that will be a fantastic team. But that's not true. Seniority didn't matter, and diverse and complementary skill sets. So that didn't matter also, and I'll get to that later in the session today. So diversity is important, but you need another ingredient to take advantage of the diversity of the team. Team size didn't matter also. And for Google's survey, the 180 teams, they had a size anywhere from a low of 3 to a high of about 50. But the median number was 9. And other studies have shown that ideal team size is 8 to 12. So we are not dismissing that, but Google didn't find it. And tenure, how long the team members had worked together, didn't matter at all. So what do you think, guys? How do you feel? Does this seem like real? Do you agree with Google's results? Maybe you can type your answers. No? Yes? Share your thoughts. Okay, Happy Learning says yes. You agree with the results? Yeah. Okay, anyone else? You want to share your thoughts? Do you agree with these results that these 8 factors don't really matter? What are your thoughts? You can take a minute to share your thoughts. Does it surprise you? Does it kind of shock you? Yeah, Paul says some data was surprised around diversity, etc. Okay, good. So I know this is a lot of these factors are counterintuitive. And so moving on. So if all these factors didn't matter, then the question is that what really mattered? So what Google found was that who was on the team composition didn't matter a whole lot, but how the team interacted or the team dynamics, that did matter a whole lot. So the team norms, the unwritten rules, that is what made all the difference. Now think about this. This is at Google. This is not average Joe kind of a company. The work is highly technical and people are highly skilled. So even at Google, what mattered was team interaction and not team composition. So what they found was, and in fact, Google themselves was surprised. They thought that they would have the perfect algorithm or the perfect recipe to put in a little of this, put in a little of that, and voila, they would have the best performing teams. But they themselves were shocked also. So going back to what mattered, and so these are the 5 factors that mattered according to the Google study, which was very extensive. So the first one is psychological safety. And as you know, it's the topic of today's session. So what do we mean by psychological safety? Has anyone heard of this term before, psychological safety? Yes or no? You can type yes or no. Has anyone heard of this term, psychological safety? Do you know what it is? Okay, great, Eleanor. Aisha, she says yes. Great. Fantastic. You guys seem to be very knowledgeable and interactive bunch of participants today. Okay, so yes, but not so clear. So good then, we'll try to make it clear today. Thank you. So what does psychological safety mean? So do I feel safe on this team to be myself, or do I have to hold back? Do I feel comfortable on this team to ask silly questions? You know, no questions are silly, but are you comfortable asking silly questions? Do I feel okay to express my opinions freely? Can I share my half-formed ideas, not the complete presentation, but half-formed ideas? Can I admit if I made a mistake? Can I share honest feedback with a colleague? And can I do all of these things without the fear of being embarrassed, ridiculed, rejected, or punished? And if I can do that on my team, then there is a high level of psychological safety on my team. So that's the first factor of the 5 factors, psychological safety. The second one is dependability. So what does it mean? I think it means exactly like the word means actually. When team members say that they will do something, can you depend on them to keep their promise? And will they do the work with quality and on time? Or the opposite would be, are they unreliable and not dependable? Okay, great. So the third factor is structure and clarity. So what do we mean by that? So as a team member, am I clear of what is expected of me? What is my job? What is my role? And do I know how to do my job? Do I know how to fulfill my role and responsibilities? If yes, then I have structure and clarity on my team. And then the next one, excuse me, is meaning. So meaning means, does my work give me a sense of personal and professional fulfillment? So is my work fulfilling? Can I derive meaning from it? Is it aligned to what I do best? So that's number 4. And finally, number 5 is impact. So what does it mean? The work that I do, does it impact someone? Does it impact a greater good? And the greater good could be in terms of impact on the team, impact to the department, impact to the company, impact to the customers, or even a larger purpose or calling. So take a look at these 5 factors, and I'm going to ask them a little later to you, and I'm going to show the next one to you. Okay, So here are the same 5 factors, but they are arranged in the form of a pyramid. And so you can guess which one is the most important. And obviously, it is the base of the pyramid. So psychological safety was the most important. So Julia Rozovsky was on Google's human resources team that was part of this study that lasted 2 years. And I am quoting her that she said that psychological safety was far and away the most important of the 5 factors that they found. The most important. In fact, she called it the underpinning of the other 4. The underpinning of the other 4. What does it mean? Psychological safety creates a culture in which the other 4 factors can either flourish, they can be nourished, or they suffocate. So psychological safety is like the soil in which you plant seeds. So if you have the right soil, then the rest of the seeds would grow. So now what happens without psychological safety? So people hold back and they stay silent. So when people don't speak up, what happens is at work, everyone loses. Every time someone stays silent when they were supposed to voice their opinion, you lose a potential learning opportunity, a potential course correction opportunity in your day-to-day work. And over time, lack of psychological safety can cause a lot of things. Underperformance, resistance to change, lack of innovation, disengagement, higher attrition, and even unethical behaviors. So without psychological safety, organizations are kind of leaving money on the table. So they fail to utilize the collective intelligence of the teams. So think about this now. You hire the best people, you pay them handsome salaries, but you fail to capitalize on their talents. So isn't that a colossal waste? And not having psychological safety, the collateral damage is immense of the lack of psychological safety. So before I move on to the next slide, can I test if you guys are paying attention? Can you type in the 5 factors that Google found impact a team's effectiveness? Type in any one of those 5 factors that you remember. And if you have a good memory, you can type all 5. Right, Ranjita, if you don't remember any other one, we have to remember psychological safety. Fantastic, guys. Fantastic. Thank you for paying so much attention. Okay. Now let's think about this. Why has psychological safety become so important? So the reason is we have moved from industrial age to knowledge work in just last few decades. And we have entered information age, communication age. So this is very true, or even more true in the last 20 years at the start of the new millennium. Do you guys agree we have entered knowledge work information age? Yes or no? Here is an assembly line photo from the earlier part of the 20th century. So in the industrial age, standardization was the engine of growth and creating value. How do you create value? You find the best way and you mass produce those kinds of things. And there was one right and most efficient way to do things. And everyone had to do it the exact same ways. Now think about an employee who had some ideas, opinions, suggestions. Would they be welcomed? In fact, they would be a nuisance to the efficiency and standardization. So Henry Ford, the inventor of assembly line, he frustratingly said that when I ask for a pair of hands, why do they always come with a brain attached? What does it mean? He says that I just need people for their hands. They should leave their brain at home. So now think about today and let's fast forward to the 21st century. And almost all the work we do is knowledge work. Would you guys agree? All the work we do today, it's knowledge work. And Knowledge work today, it's complex, it's interdependent, and it is often done in global projects and done by multiple people working in teams. In fact, the work is so complex and interdependent that no one can do it themselves. So what are the engines of growth in 21st century? In 20th century, the engines of growth were standardization. Can anyone guess what is the engine of growth in the 21st century? What creates value? Anyone wants to venture some ideas in the chat box? Creative skills. Yeah, good. EQ. Fantastic. Good. Any other ideas? Continuous learning. I kind of relate to that very much. Good. Good. Very nice. Customer experience. True. Okay. So in 21st century, the engines of growth are ideas and innovation. In 21st century, strategies and plans are best guesses. They are not set in stone. In fact, execution of strategy is iterative. It involves experimenting, trial and error, and quickly learning from those errors and correcting your course. Now, unlike the 20th century work, there is no one right way to do things. And let's say you are smart enough or lucky enough to find the right way to do things. The fast pace of change makes it obsolete so rapidly. So think about Nokia. They had the best smartphone in the world, and we are going to discuss that case study a little bit later today. So unlike Henry Ford's wish that people left their brains at home, today people must bring their brains to work and collaborate with each other to solve the complex problems. So just hiring smart people is not enough. It is also important to create an environment where they can do their best work. And that is always done in collaborative teams. So we all know that in effective teams, the whole is much larger than the sum of its parts. And on the other hand, in dysfunctional teams, it's opposite. 2 plus 2 is less than 4. So today, if organizations can put the talent they have to the best and the highest use, it is a huge competitive advantage. So I'm going to start another little poll, and it is about, have you experienced any of these at work? So again, I'm going to show you these questions and you are supposed to answer yes or no, and then we will launch the poll. So first one is, you don't know something at work on a team, but you don't ask as you don't want to look ignorant. Let's say someone uses an acronym, say DSN. So you don't know what that means, but you think and make a note mentally that I'm going to, look it up later. So now when you answer these questions, two things. First is be honest and think of the team meetings with your superiors and your peers. Now, if I'm the team leader, I don't have to feel any of these things because I'm working with my direct reports or subordinates. Next, you avoid disagreeing as you don't want to be labeled at work as he's not a team player or she's not a team player. So has it happened? You don't want to put in diverse ideas. So you have a half-formed idea. So someone said, in fact, a couple of people said creativity. How does creativity work? It works by trial and error. The first idea that comes, it's usually never so good, but you build on that. So are you comfortable sharing silly ideas and silly thoughts with your team? Next one, you avoid sharing honest feedback with a senior team member as you know it'll upset her. So she'll start raising all kinds of hell and then you don't want it. So you just stay quiet. You made an honest mistake. So do you openly admit it with your peers and superiors, or you are going to try and sidestep it, not necessarily hide it? Okay, so I'm going to launch the poll. You don't know something, it has happened to 57% of the people. You avoid disagreeing. So that's kind of 40-60 split. You have a half-formed idea, so people are not so comfortable. Sharing feedback with a senior team member, it seems like that has gotten the highest score. So this is something that makes people uncomfortable, correct? And admitting an honest mistake, 80% say that they will admit an honest mistake. So great. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. Now close and we will move on. So now there's another question. As a team leader, have you possibly done this to your team members? Is it possible? So the question is, unwittingly, unknowingly, without intention, have you probably caused your team members to feel this way? Now we'll get back to the definition of psychological safety. So here is one. Being able to show and employ one's self without fear of negative consequences of self-image, status, or career. So if you speak up, you don't want to look ignorant or silly, then it'll hurt your image or status. And then if you disagree with a boss, it might help or hurt your career. Here's another definition. An individual's perception of the consequences of taking an interpersonal risk. So remember, this is interpersonal risk. Are there any consequences if I speak my mind, take interpersonal risks? Simply, you can ask this question. Can I be myself on this team, or do I have to hold back on this team? And another way to put it is, it's the shared belief by the team members that this team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. Correct? So the belief by the members of the team that this team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. So I have a quick question for you. What is the opposite of psychological safety? Can you type your answers? Lack of psychological safety, or the opposite, is an environment of psychological fear. And our brains, so what do you see in this image is a cheetah maybe, or a leopard, I'm not so sure, and a huge turtle or tortoise as some of us call it. And so the turtle or the tortoise is in danger. So when the turtle is in danger, what does it do? So when the tortoise is in danger, what does it do? So obviously, it kind of goes into its shell. It recedes back. It is scared. So now, what happens is that our brains are wired for fear detection and self-preservation. So that's from the time when early humans lived in the savannah, and that was necessary for survival. But in our modern day, we don't face any life-threatening situations that would, incite fear. But what are our fears these days? They are interpersonal fears of maybe ridicule, rejection, embarrassment, punishment, impact to our careers. So when we sense those kinds of fears, what do? We also go into our shell. We cower, we hold back, and we go into what is known as self-preservation mode. So that's how our brains are programmed. And a wonderful research from Dr. Amy Edmondson, who is the pioneer of this work on psychological safety, she calls them unconscious calculators. So think about yourself. Do you ever wake up in the morning and think that, hey, let me go to work and look ignorant, incompetent, disruptive, and not a team player? What do you think? Do you ever wake up and feel like, let me go to work and look ignorant, incompetent, disruptive, or not a team player? Would you like that? Or the answer is no? And obviously, the answer is no. It's quite the opposite. We want to look smart, capable, helpful, a good team member. So as we talked in our last slide, our brains are programmed for fear detection and self-preservation. So we are always evaluating fear through our unconscious calculators. So here are some of these questions. Don't want to look ignorant? What do? Well, don't ask silly questions, so you won't look ignorant. So we are making this unconscious decisions all the time, and then we stay silent. Don't want to look incompetent? Well, don't don't admit mistakes. Don't say you don't know anything. Hide them. Hide your weaknesses. Don't want to be called disruptive? Well, then don't give any suggestions. Go with what the boss says. Don't want to be labeled as you are not a team player? Then don't challenge the status quo. Go with the flow. So now this might be desirable in a social situation, and it might even be acceptable. But at work, it leads to serious problems. So psychological safety allows us to speak instead of remaining silent. Voicing a concern in a meeting, giving an unpleasant yet necessary feedback to a colleague, sharing a different perspective on an issue, these are all essential things at work for change, growth, and innovation. Okay, so we'll go to the flip side. Research has shown that these are the benefits of having psychological safety on your teams. First one is it improves the success rate of process innovation. So today we are in continuous process of making things cheaper, better, and faster. It increases teams learning from mistakes. So for learning to occur, fear cannot be there because learning is a cognitive ability, and when we have fear, it inhibits cognitive ability. So when people are fearful, they'll hide mistakes. They will not discuss mistakes to learn from them. Boosts employee engagement. What do you think? If you are in a psychologically safe environment, would you be more engaged or less engaged? Improves team innovation. Obviously, right? Ideas are discussed, everyone's opinions count, increases change agility. So we have to change continuously. Organizations are going continual transformations, and it helps that, and it improves performance. So these are the benefits of having psychological safety on your team. And multiple research studies have proven these. Okay. So as we had promised, I'm going to discuss a few mini case studies with the lens of psychological safety. Nokia's unbelievable failure, almost everyone knows about it. Alan Mulalle's spectacular turnaround at Ford. And then in case we have time, we will discuss the Boeing 737 MAX problems, probably at the end of the session if we have time. And then Pixar's amazing streak at the box office. So we will have the lens of psychological safety. When you have psychological safety, it is like a dividend. And when you don't have it, it's like a tax to the organization's performance. So let me at least talk about the first two. So Nokia's unbelievable fall. So everyone is aware of Nokia, but what many people may not know, and it's quite interesting. Nokia was started way back in 1965 as a paper mill in the town of Nokia, Finland. It survived and thrived for almost 150 years, a century and a half. They went through all kinds of changes, even in their product line. They went from paper mill to snow tires and to mobile or cell phones, as they are called in the Western world. So by the end of the 1990s, Nokia had a 23% market share in cell phones. And they rode the smartphone waves in the 2000s. By the year 2007, Nokia had a 50% market share in the burgeoning smartphone industry. And so that was 2007. But by 2012, the company had lost its innovative edge. And in just 7 years, the market share dropped from 50% to guess what? Just 3%. Market share down from 50% to 3% in 5 years. And this is for a company that had survived 150 years. And market value dropped by 80%. So I mean, by any count, this is an unbelievable fall. So there were many reasons for Nokia's failure, but a detailed study conducted found that The main reason was fearful emotional climate, the climate of fear. The then chairman and CEO of Nokia, Olli-Pekka, was described as extremely temperamental. Managers reported that he regularly shouted at people at the top of his lungs, and it was very difficult to tell him things he didn't want to hear. In fact, many times he pounded the table so hard that the things on the table just flew out. And because of that, managers did not communicate the severity of threats from Apple and Google. Sales teams, when they were not making the sales, they were threatened that if you don't bring the sales, you'll be fired. When they talked about the bad news from competitors, they weren't heard. Nokia's research and development team, they thought that their job was to please the upper level people, not give them a reality check. And as we all know, the results, in just 5 years, a very successful company, because of a climate of fear, almost went out of business. So in a fast-changing VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, the environment of fear is never conducive to change and innovation, even for larger companies like Nokia. Coming to the second case study, Ford's spectacular turnaround. So this is Alan Mulally, and when he took over Ford as CEO in September 2006, Ford was on the way to report a loss of $17 billion with a B for the year. But the worst had yet to come. So in the 8 years as Ford CEO, he steered the company through the financial crisis of 2008. And he did that without taking a bailout. So if you read the news, GM had to be bailed out by the government. He restructured the massive company with worldwide operations, and he returned the company to profitability by 2010 to a tune of 6.6 billion profit and doubled the stock price. Now, what is even more amazing is that he didn't do it just by cutting jobs or laying off thousands of people. He didn't lay anyone off. And what is just simply unbelievable is that in a company, auto company, which is ruled by unions, United Auto Workers and others, his approval rating stayed in the upper 90s during his entire tenure. So how did Alan Mulally orchestrate such a spectacular business turnaround? So here's a lovely story. At his first business planning meeting, BPM as he used to call them, he asked all the leaders in the room, there were 16 of them. So he said, how are we doing against our goals? And he used red, yellow, or green for key goals and metrics. The traffic light analogy. If you are green, you are okay. If you are red, you're not doing good. And yellow is close enough. So all of the 16 team members said that, yeah, it was all green. So Alan replied that, did we plan to lose $17 billion at the beginning of the year? If that is yes, answer to that question, then we are in the green. Otherwise, we are not. So eventually, one of the 16 people gathered courage and admitted that he was having trouble with production. So Alan stood up and clapped for him. He said, I am the CEO of Ford and I don't know anything about making or selling cars. In fact, Alan had spent his entire career at Boeing before joining Ford. So he continued, but we have smart people on our payroll who know how to do that. So we just have to face reality, admit problems openly, and ask for help. And then he asked the group of the 16 people that, can you help this gentleman? And just within a couple of minutes, they were all on the way to working on solving the issue instead of posturing and protecting their images. So among the many of the things that Alan brought to Ford, the most important was creating a climate of psychological safety. And he started with the top executive team and it cascaded downwards. So these are two cases of psychological safety, one positive, one negative. So I think we are going to leave this for either at the end or for another webinar. So let me discuss what psychological safety is not. So it is not immunity from consequences. So even in a psychologically safe workplace, these are the kinds of things that can happen easily. So you have performance management, you have targets, you have goals, and if you don't meet them, you can be fired. You can be reprimanded. So there are consequences. You might lose your job because of underperformance or change in the industry because company has to lay people off, or due to competence in your role. So you might also fail in a particular project or initiative. So if you think about this, in any 21st century organization, these threats are not going away anytime soon. That is part and parcel of being in business. But what happens with psychological safety is that members feel safe taking interpersonal risks, as we have seen with the two case studies. Okay, so here I want to point your attention to, this is a simple matrix of when you have high standards versus low standards and high psychological safety versus low psychological safety. I'll go with Paul. Very few companies these days have low standards. You won't be in business if you had low standards. So we have high standards and we have two choices, either low psychological safety and anxiety or high psychological safety and learning and performance. Great. So how do you create psychologically safe workplace? So earlier we talked about lack of psychological safety. So with psychological safety, as we have seen, you can get into learning and high performance zone. So progressive organizations are realizing this fact. In fact, it is one of the few sustainable competitive advantages that is available to companies today. Many companies don't promote an employee unless they have demonstrated a track record of psychological safety on the team. In fact, venture capitalists are using psychological safety assessment as a tool to evaluate risks while deciding in which team, which new idea to invest in. So they say that ideas are dime a dozen. Which team can execute? Well, the one with higher psychological safety. And Amy Edmondson's research and a lot of other research has shown that in the same organizations, team with higher psychological safety outperform. And this is true for frontline teams, and this is also true for top-level executive teams, as we saw with Ford. In fact, in last 3-4 years, psychological safety interest has just exploded after the article in New York Times by Charles Duhigg. And if you are in top management or if you are in learning and development, you should pay attention to this also. In fact, psychological safety is not an employee perk, but it is absolutely essential for performance. Okay, so how do you improve? So we are going to send the Leader's Guide to Improving Psychological Safety to you, and it contains all the details that I'm going to talk about right now. And I'll just cover a couple of them. So be inclusive both in interpersonal and decision-making settings. So what does it mean? We have diversity, but do people feel included? And one of the ways to do that is conversational equality. Everyone speaks the same amount. So initially, it might look a little bit odd. And then role rotation. So for every team meeting, you rotate role. Role model vulnerability. So this is saying things like, hey, I don't know as a leader, as a team leader, I don't know about this. You know more than me on this topic. I need help on this. Sorry, I made a mistake. When a leader role models these kinds of things, the psychological safety on the team increases. Demonstrate curiosity and listen genuinely. So active listening, being present, and asking questions and listening with the intention of learning, not just rhetorical questions. And finally, invite the team to challenge your perspectives. So as I said, all of these are in your guide. So here's a nice way of looking at two things: psychological danger versus psychological safety. So fear of admitting mistakes leads to blaming others, and then you are less likely to share different views and learning suffers. On the other hand, comfort of admitting mistakes, learning from failures, openly share ideas, and better innovation and decision making. So we'll take just about 2 minutes to do the team assessment on psychological safety. And this is based on Amy Edmondson's research on 3 factors. So now we know that you guys are not a team, but you can kind of answer thinking about your teams as to how do you feel it on your teams. So here are the 5 questions. And here we are not going to do yes or no. We are going to do on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 meaning low and 5 meaning high. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll and you can enter your data. Do you feel safe offering new ideas? So as you can see, we are all over the map in almost all of the questions, and it is not unusual. Different teams have different levels of psychological safety. So let me move on. We just have a couple of slides before we take on question and answer session. So here is our sample psychological safety assessment on the 3 factors: individual safety, team report, team respect, and team learning. And it gives you a baseline for your teams. And remember, you can win one of the 10. And you can also drill down to any one of the factors. What specifically do you need to improve? And what were the answers of the team members? And remember, this is anonymous and this is done by external agency. So you get better answers than you would try to do it internally. So what do you do after the team assessment? And obviously, it will be a team discussion. So as we said, this is about the complementary team assessments. So Google found that an external facilitator or a team coach is ideal to facilitate the discussion. Why? Because internal people have emotional history, baggage, consequences, impression management, performance management, other office politics. And these kinds of issues prevent team members from opening up, speaking freely. And that's why an external facilitator is needed to have a structured process and to guide people through different things. Okay. So create awareness of these vocabulary and the dynamics, facilitate discussion, action plan and team resources, and then follow up and provide a structured process and a forum to discuss this on a regular basis so you can improve the psychological safety on your teams. And here is how the process goes: assessment, report generation, team coaching, action plan, behavior change at work, and another assessment. And we have a process that delivers guaranteed and measurable results. It doesn't matter where your team members are, we can deliver it virtually. And you can win one of the complimentary team coaching sessions. So in a day, we will be sharing the recording of this webinar. To win the complimentary session, you will have to share it on your timeline and tag me, and then we will enter you to win one of the complimentary team coaching sessions. So assessment, facilitation, and team coaching session. And here is some other details. The 3 main factors from the research are setting the stage, inviting participation, and responding productively. And so if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. And I haven't gotten any questions, so in our coaching and teaching parlance, we kind of joke that it either means that you have understood everything or it means that you have understood nothing. So I'm going to think that you have understood everything. Any questions?